Joining us now from Washington is Bradley Bowman, who is a Senior Director at the Centre on Military and Political Power at the Foundation for Defence and Democracies. Thank you so much for coming on this evening. Look, Putin here really declaring the nuclear deterrence forces are on high alert for the second day running. What does this say to you? Is it a threat or is it to spook the West?
I think it's both. I think it's both. You know, in Putin's comments, he was, I would assume, deliberately vague. So he left listeners in Europe and the United States wondering whether he was talking about some sort of nuclear strike or maybe cyber attacks or maybe both. But, you know, if you're a military planner or someone like me, you have to kind of assume the worst. So a nuclear-oriented threat. And of course, this follows some nuclear exercises that Russia did a few days earlier that they do every year, but they move them up on the calendar to coincide with the invasion for very clear messaging purposes. And so Putin's trying to employ all tools of power here to try to intimidate the West and not stand with the people of Ukraine as they confront an invasion not seen in Europe since World War II.
Yeah, and Bradley, I want to talk about Belarus, which of course is getting more and more involved now, opening the door to Russian nukes. In your opinion, how concerning is this, and what kind of implications could this have for the entire region?
Well, you know, it remains to be seen. Some of the reporting is a little, you know, I want to see further reporting to confirm that that's the case. But, you know, this decision by Russia to put their nuclear forces on, quote, special combat readiness, unquote, status, it's a little unclear, honestly, what that means. And we'll probably find out in the next few days in more detail. But I'd say at a minimum, probably what it's going to do is reduce safeguards, right? Safeguards that are in place for a good reason with the purpose of expediting a quicker launch, right? And so that's not good news for anyone. That's not good for the world because that increases the risk of miscalculation. I was glad to see that the Biden administration responded, you know, in a kind of a temperate way and did not take the bait and escalate as well. In fact, Strategic Command, STRATCOM, responded by saying, quote, "We see Mr. Putin's statement on his nuclear forces. STRATCOM remains at an appropriate posture and remains ready should the president call upon us." I think that's about the right approach. We have the means to defend ourselves. Putin knows that, and a Russian first strike would be met with a devastating response.
Yeah, and Bradley, you know, we're really seeing Zelensky now pushing harder than ever to join NATO. How likely is this to happen, in your opinion?
I think it's unlikely that Ukraine is going to be joining NATO anytime soon. But, you know, it's interesting, right? The two biggest complaints that we hear from Putin are NATO expansion and, you know, Western military force in Eastern Europe. Yet isn't it interesting, you know, he's the primary reason for both of those things, right? He invades and occupies Georgia, parts of Georgia. You know, he invades and annexes Crimea in 2014. He fuels a separatist move in the Donbass that kills 14,000 or so Ukrainians. And now he conducts the largest invasion since World War II. And so those were all against non-NATO members. So big surprise, right, that Georgia and Ukraine want to join NATO, but he doesn't dare touch NATO members. Why is that? It's because the 1949 North Atlantic Treaty says that attack against one is attack against all. So Putin's his own worst enemy. And at some point, he's going to need to realize that the path to Russian security is living in peace and respecting the independence and sovereignty of his neighbors.
Yeah, and, you know, in saying that, Bradley, how do you believe we will see all of this escalate going forward?
I fear Putin with his, you know, KGB background, and there's serious questions about his mindset right now. I fear that he's going to only escalate. You know, we see a significant percentage of Russian forces that haven't even entered the fray yet in Ukraine. So I worry. My heart's with the Ukrainian people. I think this is going to get worse. I'll be shocked if we don't see a significant cyber attacks in the coming days and weeks. We're going to see more urban warfare. That's the bad news. The good news is the Ukrainian people are fighting to defend their country. And my review of history tells me never count out a free people defending their homes.
For sure. Bradley Bowman there, thank you for coming on. You've brought up some really, really important points. We appreciate your time.